Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of History After Hours podcast. My name is Kevin Pumphrey, and with me, as always, is Mr. Ron Franklin, and we are high school history teachers at Lakeside High School in Hot Springs, Arkansas. Today's podcast is a live Kollective Coffee podcast. Once again, we want to thank Kollective Coffee for having us out. We try to do this on the first Thursday of each month, and we recorded an interesting podcast today. This is December the 6th, I believe, 2018, and we had a great time. And students lined up for questions. We had another packed house. And we also had a very special guest. His name is Dr. Christopher Thrasher. He teaches American and World History at National Park College. And he actually works closely with Lakeside because we have a concurrent program through National Park. And so he comes down to supervise us teaching when we teach our concurrent classes, whether it's, I teach U.S. history, Mr. Franklin teaches world history, so we have already worked with him, and it was a pleasure having just another voice on the podcast and answering some of the questions that the students posed, so we had a great time. We are also actually kind of in the middle of redoing our podcast to hopefully make it a little bit more convenient and more available. And so the person behind all that, her name is Mrs. Abby Hanks, and she is helping us out quite a bit. She edits this, she produces it, so we want to thank her as well. So once again, a very interesting podcast talking about all sorts of issues. A lot of historical questions were asked during this podcast, which makes it very fun for us. For instance, you know, who is do you think was the greatest leader ever in history? You know, things of that nature were asked. But, you know, even some current politics stuff just like normal. And then, you know, what is better, Ford or Chevy kind of questions as well. So we had a great time. Once again, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter at History After Hours. And with that, enjoy the podcast. Here we are at Kollective Coffee. Today is, what is today? It is
December
Thursday,
6th.
December 6th, 2018.
Woo, this year is almost over, my man. That's
we
crazy.
have a room full of very eager students wanting participation points towards the very end of the semester. All right, so we also have a wonderful guest with us, a professor of history from National Park College. His name is Christopher Thrasher. Y'all give Dr. Thrasher a hand.
Yeah.
The intellect of the podcast just doubled, just like that.
Can we throw the word guru out there? Is that appropriate?
I wouldn't.
I
wouldn't. Yeah.
All right. So, hey, before we get going here, would you just tell the people in internet land and these folks a little bit of your background, just a 1-2 minute summary of what you do for a living?
Sounds like a job interview. Okay, so tell us a little bit about yourself.
I teach history at National Park College, as you just mentioned. I am primarily a 19th century American cultural historian. My first book was on the history of American fight sports, so if you're into boxing, wrestling, mixed martial arts, that kind of thing. In addition to teaching for the college, I also work on the side for the Park Service, so I get to do lots of wonderful things for a living.
That is outstanding.
Is it like park ranger? You get to like where you have to harass people if you want to? Like, do you have that kind of authority?
Well, I do. That's not part of the job.
Oh,
that's
okay.
just that's more of a
perk?
hobby.
It's a perk.
It's just,
Yeah.
you know, you can get those little plastic badges at Walmart, and you just, you know, people never really check your ID or anything.
I'll throw you out of the national park. You start messing around.
Yeah,
no, that's cool.
Yeah.
How long have you been doing that?
I've been with them almost the whole time I've been here, about 3 years. Mostly working in the archive and working with like digitization of photographs and things like that.
Nice.
So neat stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we have a room full of students, and I'm sure they've thought of some brilliant questions to ask, things that you might want to know. It doesn't have to be politics. It doesn't have to be current events. It would be great if it had something to do with history, since that's what you're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
So, who's first? What brave soul? All right, we got one right here.
All right, so... okay. Go ahead. State your name, sir.
Yeah, my name is Ian Hollis, and my question is, in wake of George H.W. Bush's recent death, what would you say his greatest achievements were while in office, and how is his legacy remembered today?
Good question.
We're going to let guest of honor, Dr. Thrasher, take this first off, then we'll jump in.
Yeah,
Put you on the spot.
That's fine. That's fine. Well, when I think of George Bush as president, the first thing that comes to my mind is the Gulf War. And I think that's the first big major conflict after the end of the Cold War. This kind of rise of a new world order. The Cold War was dangerous and it was scary, but it was also predictable and it was easy to understand. It was very much a dichotomy, or at least it was typically understood that way. And the idea that you have this kind of rise of rogue nations outside the confines of the major power blocks, and what are they going to do, and what powers are in place to constrain them now that you don't have the old Soviet and American blocs. To maybe restrain some of their impulses. And I think whatever else you want to say about the man, I think he handled that situation really well. I think it was a great strategic and political and military victory, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for that.
Do you see him as the way he promoted himself during the campaign, I remember, was, let me carry on the legacy of Reagan, and, we're riding the same horse in the same direction, and vote for me because why would we change now? We won the Cold War. The Soviets are on the run, and so do you think that was an adequate way for him to describe himself in the long run?
I think it was a good campaign strategy.
Yeah,
I don't think he really was Reagan. I think he and Reagan were very different in a lot of ways. Yeah.
I think George H.W. was more thoughtful. I mean, he was an intellect to some degree. He thought long range. Reagan was pretty spur of the moment. Let's do this, and of course Reagan had all the rumors that he was kind of not in the loop and things. When somebody first dies, it's hard to say anything bad about him, right? It's like we just remember the good stuff, which maybe is appropriate for a while at least. Two things, and I could say some negative things about him and Reagan and the whole bunch, and basically every president we've ever had. However, the two things, the restraint to not go into Iraq, I thought was appropriate, and the willingness to raise taxes that cost him the election.
Yeah.
I guess to some degree to Bill Clinton, because Slick Willie comes on and no one really knows who he is. I mean, George H.W.'s the incumbent. He just won the war. His popularity is pretty high. It looks like re-election's a shoo-in. And then the combination of I feel your pain, that mixed with the raising of the taxes, which I think was good for the country. I think we had to do that after that recession. I think both of those things, so I give him some credit for that.
The campaign promise not to was the clincher there. There's this famous thing, if you guys go back and look at any of the footage during the campaign, the famous, read my lips, no new taxes. And he just stood on that over and over again. And then when he finally had to, because that's what the situation demanded, like I agree with Pumphrey, like that's exactly what needed to happen. However, it cost him because people said, well, you're not fulfilling your promises and you lied to us. And then there were some darker things that had kind of come to light about, let's say, Iran-Contra during that time, too. Yep. He has to pardon Reagan. So some of Reagan's legacy, so to speak, was tainted to a certain extent. And then, he's having to deal with the fallout from that. I do agree with you, though. I think across the board, that Gulf War, that first engagement was – I had an uncle who was actually teaching in Kuwait up until the summer before. And he had come home for the break, and while he was here in the States, Iraq invaded Kuwait, and he went back after the fact much later, and nothing was the same. Everything was lost, and they pillaged the whole thing, and so this coalition that we led going in, I think, was the right thing to do. And Bush deserves credit for that. His foreign policy, I think, was spot on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and dude was a real deal war hero.
Oh yeah. Youngest Navy pilot ever. Do you guys know that? George H.W. Bush was he actually lied about his age to get into the military so that he could became the youngest Navy pilot ever. Dude is a bona fide war hero. And like I said, politics aside, he served this country well. Again, how soon is too soon to start trashing him, though? We'll wait.
By the way, you have the coolest last name ever. Thrasher? Good grief. My name is Pumphrey.
For a history teacher,
what I would give to have the last name Thrasher.
You could change it.
You could change it.
Yeah, you could change it to Thrasher.
Like, maybe the only thing better would be like Johnny Chainmail.
Maybe so. Anyhow, all right. So who's next?
In your opinion, who is like the best world leader ever?
History of the world.
All right, say it again because I missed it.
Best world leader in the history of the world. That is that's a lot of time there. Let's start with Hammurabi. Okay. All right. Does one just... Okay, so when you talk about leaders, there's different types of leaders. So you've got military conquerors, you've got diplomats, you've got people that have taken a country and rags to riches. So, take off, y'all.
Oh, go ahead. We're gonna let you. We're gonna let you take the spotlight every time.
Okay.
Put him on the spot.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Let's
Trial by fire.
let's see what I can come up with here.
So
I mean,
world history, yeah, ever. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
where do you even start with that? I mean, I guess the first question is, I mean, what do you mean by best?
Right.
I mean, that would be how could you possibly quantify that?
Are you the best evil dictator? Are you the best egalitarian? Are you the best enlightened despot? What are you?
Let's reword it just a tad, and let's say, of all the leaders to ever live, who had the most immediate impact on their country, taking them from a know-nothing country? The country has to exist. They take over and build it in their reign.
You're not going to count people that
no, let's not do
countries?
founders.
Okay, all right.
Let's do leader, because it's one thing to found a country.
Right.
We could easily go through those, but let's talk about somebody that took over a country and really elevated it to the next level, and let's like power-wise.
Emperor Qin Shi Huangdi, the guy that created China's first empire. Immediate impact because they ended decades worth of civil war through brutality himself, but they stopped the nonsense. That's an immediate impact. And I mean, imagine this, a guy who had to be more brutal than open warfare, right? And then set a standard where we're not going to mess around anymore. I'm going to be in charge, and you're going to follow the rules. If not, I'm going to hurt you more than you feel possible. A guy who, once they created a system that established peace, again, through force, but immediately set a legalist system in place where we're going to follow the rules and we're going to have law and order and we're going to march forward and we're going to expand our territory. A guy created an empire out of ruins. It was still China because we'd had things before, but he actually took it and ran with it and created a system that people are still sort of in awe of today. That's my choice.
I thought you might go Bismarck, and then I guess he's a founder.
Well, yeah, he creates a country, so.
I'll go with Meiji in Japan.
Okay.
I think, and I'm a cultural historian, and I love like old photographs and things like this, and just the visual change.
Yeah.
You know, the idea that, being a little simplistic, Japan went from effectively a feudal society to a Victorian-era society in just a few years, and he was, like 14 when he takes the throne?
Yeah, and besides the fact that they were in our grip at that point, and they renegotiate. Yeah, that's a good choice.
Yeah.
The Meiji Restoration, folks. We'll study that eventually.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to go American since I'm an American guy. Yeah. I mean, we're all Americans. But,
you're the American. Okay.
Of the presidents, I immediately think some of the, like FDR, but I think Teddy Roosevelt.
Really?
That's a guy who went 180 a little bit. I mean, he reined in he started a process that would be continued on. I think he changed the direction of our country. I'm trying to think of other presidents. I mean, Teddy Roosevelt did it kind of by himself in a way, like where Jackson is a product of the time. I mean, he was a hero, and so people admired him so much. But Teddy Roosevelt, everybody was scared of him. He became president by happenstance, and then he kind of went right at the big, the rich, and kind of the whole progressive era. Now, I could criticize. I'm trying to think. I guess he'd be my president, maybe. Did the U.S. take a bigger leap with one president? I mean, you could go Lincoln, slavery. I mean,
I think Lincoln's the obvious answer.
I think so too.
That, but it's almost too obvious.
I think so. Yeah, that's why I was trying to go somebody else.
Is it, in a sense, does Lincoln count as one of those guys that helped create a country, though, because we had split? So maybe he gets maybe we have to put a caveat there and put him to the side because it's a unique circumstance. We were no longer really the union that we had been, so maybe he doesn't count in this context.
Yeah, I don't know. Did the South really legally secede in the first place? Okay, well, we could debate about that.
So Roosevelt? Who'd you end up? If you can't do Lincoln, who would?
If you want to talk about changing our country, it's FDR. The New Deal starts us on a liberal. I mean, the whole government welfare, all that stuff is completely upended by FDR. But in a way, Teddy Roosevelt kind of started some of that. I don't know. That's a tough question.
So subjective.
I know. Yeah, it is. You'd think Jefferson would have been that guy, but he didn't do it as much. All right, next
Jefferson
question.
Davis? What are you talking about?
No, Thomas.
Taylor Ramirez, and what's a social stigma that people need to get over?
Like if somebody calls you something?
A social stigma.
Like to be stigmatized, like a negative
You mean
connotation
like
for being...
stereotyping and that kind of stuff? Is that the question, Taylor? Is it like you're talking about like stereotyping and things like that, or things that need to be ended? There's different ways to approach the question. I'm trying to formulate what I want to say here. Social stigma, something that's been stigmatized that we need to end. My immediate go-to is to end Islamophobia in this country. I think that is fairly rampant across especially rural areas in the country who may not have any exposure to people of that faith. It's the first thing I think of.
I mean, I agree with that to some degree. I think there's limits to that.
Well, I mean...
stereotypes they exist for a reason too, right? So if, when you're in an airport going through security and you see that 80-year-old woman, it has to be random. So they have to, and you're just like, people, I implore you, she's not a terrorist. And so you immediately want to stereotype in that situation, but you can't. I mean, it's illegal to do that, really.
Well,
they have to make it random.
I'm not suggesting that there's not radicalization that needs to be a cause for concern, but at the same time, 1.3 billion people aren't all out to get us. And so it's important for us to recognize that, because then all of a sudden it turns into a form of harassment day in and day out, which could in turn cause some radicalization to build or grow where it didn't exist before. And I think that's something we should try to work on.
That's definitely something I think we're working through now as a country, ever since 9/11 especially. You have one that comes up too?
I'll take what you're going with and actually take in a different vein. I would say atheism. I think there's a tremendous amount of distrust of anyone who rejects, any kind of theology. I've seen surveys that suggest that Muslims are more accepted, even than atheists.
That's the thing. Like, if you want to become president,
yes.
First of all, you got to believe in God.
Absolutely.
Any of them will work.
Yeah.
But you can't not believe in God, because that destroys your political...
Have we had a candidate for major office in this country that proclaims atheism?
Not publicly.
Never. No, not publicly. No? There's rumors, of course, but no.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I don't think we've ever had a major candidate for president that hasn't proclaimed some form of Christian faith. Even.
Do you think that someone would immediately be rejected by the bulk of the voting public?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. The fact that we've only had one Catholic. The fact that we've had, I think, one vice presidential nominee.
We almost had a Mormon.
Almost had a Mormon come in there.
We almost had a Jewish guy.
Yeah.
Except for
Bernie Sanders is Jewish.
Sanders.
Yeah.
All that's recent.
Well, right, yeah.
I mean,
and he didn't win the nomination.
Well, that's true too.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily because of that, I hope.
Well, not necessarily. Yeah. But
like they had to crown Clinton queen of the Democratic Party, right?
But isn't that the nature?
They had to do.
Isn't that the nature of politics? You look to see what like Hillary Clinton was against gay marriage till 2013. Yeah. Obama was against it. He was against it. He's like,
so was Dick Cheney until his daughter came out as gay, and then all of a sudden he's for it. Oh, happy day.
I know. So, I mean, it's kind of the nature of politics. If it gets to the point where Americans, 50% or more, will accept it, then that will probably have a lot of atheist candidates.
All right. So what's your ism then that needs to be?
How about Arkansasism?
We
get discriminated. We don't have shoes.
You know what? That's a
We're
thing.
missing our teeth.
If you travel outside this state, there are people who. This is the honest to God's truth. Where were we when this happened? Somewhere in Wisconsin. And we came through, and there were people that we were talking to, and they're from, hey, where are you from? Blah, blah, blah. And they were like, well, we're from New York. Where are you from? And we said, hey, we're from Arkansas. And they went and turned and walked away from us without saying another word. This is no lie. And I was like, okay. And they immediately had looked down at our feet to see if we were wearing shoes. That was a thing. We came into Minnesota. We had traveled across North Dakota, which I advise highly against, by the way. There's absolutely nothing in North Dakota. Don't go there. It's, right?
There's another stereotype.
There's no, I've been there. It's not a stereotype. That's absolutely true. There's no reason to have two Dakotas. There's no reason for two Dakotas. There should be one thing. There's
only 5 people there anyway.
There's 5 people, and I think that you drive down the road, and there's a sign that says, population 7, and I think that counts one of the dogs on the road I saw, right? There's nobody there. Anyway, so we come out of, the best thing about North Dakota is the sign that says, welcome to Minnesota. Like, that's awesome there, right? So we get in there, and we stop at a hotel, and the guy goes, hey, where are you from? And I was like, we're from Arkansas. And he did a double take. I've never seen anybody do that in real life. He was like, and I was like, what? And he said, that is not what I thought you were going to say. I said, why is that? He said, well, because you don't sound like it. I'm like, what am I supposed to sound like? Am I supposed to talk like this? Is that what you're expecting? You know? I mean, and besides that, even if I do have an accent from Arkansas, the people who live in Minnesota, I mean, come on, you want to talk about accents, but here's the rule, just so you know, I don't want to take up all the time. If you're visiting, you have the accent. If someone from Minnesota came here, they have the accent. Don't let anybody tell you any different. You people in Arkansas have really funny accents. No, bro. You with us now. All right, so anyway, sorry.
Yeah, when you go through a place like that, you understand why people have guns. Like, you see a house, it's like 70 miles, there's another house. Like, if something goes down, you're on your own.
Yeah.
There's no cops going to show up.
Have you been there? Seriously. Have either of you been there?
No, why would I go?
Don't
there?
go.
You've already told me.
No, okay. Just take my... The reason I was in North Dakota, just my 75-year-old mother was one state away from visiting every state in the Union, and she said, oh, we got to go to North Dakota. And I went out of my way, hundreds and hundreds of miles through the wilderness to take my aged mother,
Jedediah Smith,
to North Dakota so she could stand by the sign for 3 seconds and take a picture. And then we left. And I was
I like how this was about what stereotypes should we get rid of. We immediately start making fun of people from around.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to disagree with you on this one because, and there's certainly anti-Arkansas bias.
You're not going to change my mind.
But at least people acknowledge that Arkansas is in the United States. I lived in New Mexico. If you ever want to bang your head against a wall, get on the phone and try to order and have something sent to New Mexico. People do not think New Mexico is in the United States. I got into a heated argument with somebody.
Who thinks that?
It was somebody I was trying to order something like a Christmas gift, and I was arguing. I'm like, no, New Mexico is in the United States.
Like, bro, that's not a thing.
Yeah. And so finally, I said, okay, how many states are there? And they said 50. And I said, name them. And they hung up on me because I thought eventually they would have to say New Mexico. But they decided they'd had enough.
I'm pretty sure New Mexico is just a fancy name for northern part of old Mexico.
All right, next.
All right, well.
How much truth do you think there is in the expression, history is decided by the victors?
Is the question decided by the victors or written by the victors?
Clarification, right?
Yeah. And I will just, if I may real quick, so if you're suggesting that history is written by the victors, I encourage you, read some Civil War history. It's not written by the people who won.
Yeah. Is that an anomaly, though, or do you think that that's pretty standard, really? Like, everybody tells their own story, yeah?
They do. I think a lot of times the losers get a lot more obsessed with the story. I think if you look like at Union veteran publications, they're very concerned with like health care and things like this. Like they want to recover and go back on with their life they won. So they don't really feel the need to celebrate it in the same way. Whereas Union, or rather Confederate veterans are just really obsessed with all the what ifs and this kind of thing. So, yeah.
What's your opinion on like the Civil War was fought because of slavery? Like, because there's a lot of historians that believe, well, no, it was more of a states' rights issue and a property rights, and that what both can be true at the same time. I understand, but there definitely has been a lot of people say, well, it wasn't about slavery, it was about name it, the violations of the Constitution by the North or whatever.
I think this is a place where it's really helpful to actually go to the primary sources and see what people of the time were saying. And so I encourage you, if you haven't ever done this, if you're really curious about the causes, go back and read the articles of secession from all the different states. And they're very clear about why they're leaving the country. And I'll give you a hint. They're not saying anything about states' rights. They're saying something very, very different. So,
yeah, and on your STEM-based test, I don't know if you noticed the South Carolina Declaration of Independence was in there. So maybe you noticed as you were taking the test. Okay.
What about the away from primary sources, but things that end up in textbooks generally, let's say, is that tends to be more focused on the victors, you think? Or
it depends on where you are. The textbooks in Texas are very different than the textbooks in Minnesota.
Yeah, fair point, yeah. All right, awesome.
Sophia Guerrero, you have a meeting with the president, and he has agreed to change 5 things you want. What are they?
Okay, 5 things? Can I immediately get him out of office? No, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have went there. Number 1, you're not president. Number 2. Okay, sorry. I can't help it. let's try to narrow it to 3 because 5 we can't count that high. We're history teachers, not math teachers. All right, so
Can you? I have trouble with that. Okay.
So you're talking to Trump. You want to change 3 things.
Okay. About him or about America?
Once again,
or about we want to narrow the question maybe.
Teachers pay. Number 1, teachers should get a lot more money. I don't know. That's a tough one. If you that would take some thinking.
There's so many things we could say. First thing, like, calm down.
Yeah, quit tweeting so much. That it would help you and us.
The tweet storms, yeah.
But policy-wise, I mean, I think probably pulling out of the Paris climate thing, it took a lot to get that joker together, and for him just to declare that. I'm not saying that we can really do a lot. I don't know how much government's getting together. I don't know if we want to destroy our entire economy to try to solve a problem we might not can solve. But getting all those nations to come together to sign that, to make an attempt, was a big deal, I think. And for us just to go, no, we're out, kind of puts us not at the leading edge of trying to solve this problem. So that might be something I would think of.
Yeah. We've been hesitant to be part of the climate initiatives anyway, though. I mean, the Kyoto Protocol, that was, when was that? What year that was? Early 2000s maybe. Anyway, there was 90-something countries joined in, and we chose not to. It was like us and Afghanistan, I think, didn't join that. The rest of us, no. Everybody thought it was a good idea except us to work on climate issues. My thing would probably be, like, I agree with him that we need to be in a stronger stance compared to China and their economic manipulation and their theft over our intellectual properties and things like that. But I don't like the whole tariff approach. That bothers me because I think it's going to do more harm than good in the long run. So I think that would be my one.
Yeah.
And then you said one. So what do you have?
I would just say transparency. I think this is an administration that is, to a degree that I don't know that I could ever look at any other time in history, that has just been very, very opaque and intentionally, kind of obscuring what they're up to, and the tax return issue and these joint defense agreements with other people and whatever. Just lay it all out there. If there was just complete honesty, and I'm not saying he is or isn't a criminal. I'm not saying he is or isn't guilty of things he's been accused of. But I would feel much better one way or the other if he would just be transparent.
As 3 history teachers, and we've talked to other history teachers, and I'm even in college still with a professor, we're living in strange times.
Yeah,
this is a very
absolutely.
unique time with Trump being, the whole thing is unique with the Republican Party and the left-wing liberals, and it's just, we're living in strange times, people.
My name's Hayes. Do you think that, like, Reagan and Bush, their administrations were significantly to blame for the AIDS crisis in the 80s and 90s?
All right, well, I wasn't going to bring it up, because we were doing the whole let's be nice to Bush because he just died thing.
Well, it makes sense with Reagan in a way because he doesn't think the government should be used for social engineering. So I'm just saying
there's clear indications and actual audio of people inside the Reagan/Bush administration when the information about the AIDS, but the brewing crisis that it was. And they could have sort of allocated resources to try to figure out what this was, what was going on. There's audio of them laughing about the situation and saying, well, it's really not our problem because it's only for gay dudes, and therefore, so what? And they kind of chuckled about it, and that's offensive. And that was something that the public didn't hear at the time, and they obviously did not spend the money that they could have and I do agree with you, like, to a certain degree, they don't want to, hands off government type of stuff. But realistically, that is something that, in hindsight, they probably should have taken more seriously.
I think they should be judged for it. I think we should look back and critique that moment. However, that was his kind of thing to not really step in for.
Yeah, but there was open mocking though, and they just weren't even considering the idea that they needed to do something about this because apparently, humans are expendable in multiple ways. So.
My name's Carson Phillips, and I was wondering about the how y'all feel about the recent rise of recreational marijuana in the United States and what the future may hold.
The rise of recreational marijuana. Is that a pun? Because, high. Okay.
Yeah, the rise. It's really high right now. It's just soaring.
There's All right. I'll let you guys take it. Are you asking us like for or against, or what are you asking?
No.
I
mean, they haven't done anything with it yet. In Sessions is now. He was the one that was really, really against it. Nothing really became of it. I think more states will eventually end up passing it, and I think just like a lot of things, once a lot of states pass it, there will be no law against it, and therefore it'll just be like alcohol is. It'll be taxed and regulated, and
There's a better chance on them coming down on the new sort of jewel issues, the vaping stuff, more than they will about the legalization of marijuana, not just medicinal but also recreational. So.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think there's clearly a trend, and I don't see it changing anytime soon. It's always dangerous to make predictions, but yeah, I think we're clearly headed in a particular direction.
Tourism to Amsterdam is down, coincidentally.
Yeah.
Coincidentally.
Who needs to go there? We've got Colorado. Okay. Next.
I think just to touch on that just a little bit more, I think that in the long run we may have a reduction in crime because a lot of the thing about cartels and people who've been really making lots of money by bringing product into the country, and then you have a criminal element that's responsible for distributing it. Once it's legalized maybe across the nation and it's regulated and controlled and it's quote unquote safer than it would be under the other circumstances, I think more attitudes will change about it, honestly, in the long run.
All right.
I'm Tyler Tidwell, and my question is, do you think parents should be forced to have their children vaccinated?
Wow, that's a... Well, yeah. Take off. I don't... Stew on that.
It's... I think that... I wish Nixon was here. He could help us with the legalities on that.
Richard?
Well,
we have a teacher named Nixon.
Jeremy Nixon. There are rules and regulations state to state about child abuse, right? And does this constitute child abuse if we consider through the courts that maybe it is because you're allowing them to be exposed to harmful conditions that then would cause them to, their quality of life can be diminished and or ended because they're not vaccinated, perhaps. So there's lots of... when did this trend start? Like there's this big movement, right? Was it the whole thing with somebody online posted that maybe it causes autism? Now everybody's freaking out. Is that how that started?
I believe there was actually a fraudulent study. I believe it was a guy named Wakefield, if I recall correctly, who had kind of fudged some of his data. I'd have to double check on that, but I believe there was one kind of fraudulent study that suggested an autism link, which was ultimately debunked.
Were the vaccinations for things like polio and not scarlet fever? What's the Didn't we force vaccinations at one time, or am I just making that up? Is there ever a point in our country's history where we said, okay, everybody's getting it, so that you don't get it?
I don't know. There's ever been a time when there was just an absolute blanket. You must do this.
So they just promoted the idea that it's
exceptions.
in your best interest, but they never.
And I think you're looking. I don't think there's ever been a federal law on the issue. So you're looking at state and localities and school boards, and do you want your child to go here?
The forcing, Tyler, is kind of the key thing. Recommendations, strong recommendations, but I don't know. I mean, because. But then again, you're talking about children who can't really make those decisions for themselves, and they're at risk because their parents are idiots, basically.
And how do you define force? Are you being forced if you say, well, in order to attend this school, you must have these vaccinations to protect the other children? Is that force? Is it force only if your children are taken away? Or is it a fine? I mean, what exactly does force mean?
Right.
Because it can be very different.
It's an interesting question, though.
Okay, looking back in history, we view many laws as unjust. In your opinion, what laws do we have today that may be viewed as unjust in 20 years?
The what will they one day judge us for question. I like that. Well, I mean, the marijuana law might be looked back in 50 years as like, why were they doing that? That was not good. Just like kind of like we look back at prohibition and go, that didn't work.
Death penalty, perhaps?
Death penalty?
Oh, yeah. I think I'll take one even more controversial than that. I could foresee a moment when eating meat is seen as this incredibly barbaric, particularly as we get better about nutrition and vat-grown meat, the idea of killing a living animal so that you can eat, particularly to a generation someday that maybe does not deal with that reality. I could see that being seen as just very barbaric.
If we go to that level, do you think that curbs hunting across the country as well?
No, I mean,
if we're talking about
animal control will always be around because this.
Well, I mean, I know it's necessary, but I'm saying.
Yeah, the mix we have is not natural, but what it would definitely help would be, the breeding of cows and so many cows, and that's a huge deal, right? So factory farming could completely change. And, they've done it. They have synthetic meat.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You know what's crazy is and I think I might have talked about this on the podcast before, with the synthetic meat, the psychological part of it is what's going to be tough for people to get over because they just go, ugh. I mean, they're willing to not think about the cow they eat, but synthetic, grown in a lab?
Once it looks like hamburger, I think everybody's on board. Because, we eat a lot of crap that's not food. Cheetos, for example. I love me some Cheetos, but that's not food. It's just puffed chemicals. That's all it is. And it's going to kill me. But I can't help it.
Yeah.
Right? So I think that we could get over it if we really just
But if we keep moving in the direction, I think factory farm, some of that stuff, the coal, hanging on to these dying technologies because of the money, I think our generations will come back and go, hey, they could have went solar or wind, years ago. Why did they hang on so long? So I think stuff like that too. Okay, next.
My question is, in your opinion, who's the most courageous president in American history?
Courageous.
Like go against popular opinion and all that kind of thing. That to me is what I think courage is as a president, is going against I think John Adams, man. I immediately think of him not going to war with France. He went against his own party, the Federalists. It cost him re-election. He might not have won anyway, but I love the fact that he just had the guts to say no to Hamilton and be like, no, we're not going to war. I'm going to send another peace delegation. Now, there could be a lot of other things at play because I just have a very peripheral knowledge of that situation, but that seemed pretty courageous because he could have went to war and probably got reelected. There might be another one, though, that's better. Lincoln, that's a obvious answer once again. He had pressure to compromise. Thousands are dying. Just give them their country.
Think about being Lincoln. On the day you took office, the country ripped itself in half. And now it's on you to try to figure out what to do and not run away from that situation. I mean, he had to have kind of felt it coming, but then when it actually did, that had to be this sort of jaw-drop moment. It's going to be a sacrifice for him to continue, and he knows it, right? And ultimately, I mean, how do you preserve something that's determined to tear itself apart? And after the war, to have the courage to stand and say, we need to let bygones be bygones and heal the wounds and reunite.
Yeah, that dude had a rough 5 years. Besides his son dying and him dying by assassination. If you just look at the pictures of him aging, you could tell that war was weighing on him. Yep. But, I mean, I don't know. You might have a different of opinion or somebody else in mind.
I mean, I really want to say Lincoln, but it's almost like a cheating answer. It's so obviously. Yeah.
That's why I started with Washington. I was like, no, Adams.
And Washington also is, But I think that's the right answer. So if it's a cheat, it's a cheat. But I'm gonna say Lincoln.
Ooh, just for fun, what about FDR taking the country in a more socialist style track when the country was obviously not necessarily ready for that, because there was a potential coup d'état against him with the sort of a fascist minded group here in the country. A lot of people don't know that there was inner workings in our country where they were going to actually come together and have a puppet, basically cabinet member, step up as a de facto president and make Roosevelt step to the side, like appoint a guy who's going to be sort of the supreme ruler. There's a coalition of super wealthy guys like the DuPont boys and it almost happened in this country. Yeah. Actually, military people. So to purposefully stand in the face of the obvious sort of global context of rising fascism at that time, I think was pretty courageous.
I mean, if you're looking for an unconventional answer, I'll go with the other Roosevelt. I'd say Teddy Roosevelt in terms of personal courage. whenever the Spanish-American War broke out. He's a guy that very easily could have, escaped any personal danger at all. But he immediately resigned his position, went out, and by all accounts, however you feel about him on political issues, he was personally courageous and didn't hesitate to put himself in harm's way and very nearly, got himself killed in the process. So
Yeah. Let me go with another unconventional one. Carter.
Really?
Jimmy Carter. He could have been justified in when the hostages were taken. And he tried that. He didn't.
Yeah.
He just no. He was a guy that came in. He didn't really know what was going on, but he had these strict beliefs, and he stuck to them. And of course, it cost him an election again. And but for him not to go in there, and he could have went. We could have went in easily militarily and started cleaning house, and he chose not to. I think he's the only president in history that we didn't fire a bullet from a gun.
Oh, contrary, my friend. Like, we had all kinds of things going on in South America at that time.
From Carter's?
Yeah, during Carter's administration.
Oh, that he ordered?
Well, that he was at least privy to. And,
I know we had some undercover.
I don't know if he actually. Yeah, well,
talking about
there's CIA involvement, and he knows about that. There's a lot of evidence about that. So, yeah.
Okay. I'd have to think that through. All
Yeah.
right. Oh, and I know during those years there was a lot of course, that came out later.
Sure.
Okay, next question.
Hi, my name is Kyle, and in your opinion, which is better, Ford or Chevy?
I'm going Chevy. Sorry, bro. I know that's not the answer you're looking for.
Japanese, maybe.
Oh, you say Toyota.
Well, here's what happened in the 70s. America started doing something very unproductive. They started building their cars like we build cell phones. After about 60, 70,000 miles, and Japan went the other way. No, we're going to go quality. We want these things to last forever, and you see the results. There's a lot of Camrys and Hyundais and all that on the road. Why? Because they last forever. So, I'm not saying Fords and Chevys don't make good trucks and cars and all that stuff now, which I was a Ford guy when I was a kid. But, now that I'm a family man and I need the gas mileage, we're going to go Toyota.
My answer was partly just to mess with you and partly based on just aesthetics. I mean, it's just a personal preference. It has nothing to do with the quality of either vehicle, honestly.
Yeah, I'm not really a car guy, so.
Yeah, I'm not either. I drive a Toyota unapologetically.
There you go. 1,000 miles to the gallon. It lasts 25 years. Yeah, I'm doing that. I'm a teacher.
Yeah.
All right, next question.
Give me more money. I'll be a Ford guy.
Catherine Calandro, I was wondering if any of you believed in the conspiracy theory involving the Titanic, and if you need me to elaborate, I can.
Yes, elaborate.
Please. There's a conspiracy. There's a conspiracy theory that the ship was switched out with the Olympic and just named something different, and that
The Olympia.
Yeah, and that higher-paying people didn't write it, even though they were expected to, because they knew the insider information. And so it wasn't supposed to go on the voyage, but they did it anyway for money.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't in the movie, so that's all I know.
There were some really wealthy people that went down with that ship, though. So I don't know.
Yes.
I don't. That one's a little. I'd have to know more about what they're claiming to make a good argument about that one way or the other. I really don't know what to say.
I'm just going to say no. No, I don't buy it.
Yeah, I don't know enough about it.
Yeah.
I can't sort of point by counterpoint take it apart, but I disagree generally with conspiracy theory. So
I do think that girl was selfish for sitting
Hey,
on that piece
man.
of wood, and that guy, like they could have taken turns.
Rose.
You know,
You know what? It's a lack of trying, partly on his part too, because he gave one good shot at trying to get up on that door, and
Yeah,
then he
so
was
I
like,
was like,
"Well, I guess
dude,
I can't get up there. I guess I'm gonna freeze in the Atlantic."
Your whole
Come
life
on, dude.
depends on
I
get
would
up
be
there.
scrambling up that door. Like, give me something to hang on to. No, that's nonsense.
Yeah.
And then she's like, the part that really catches me is at the end when he's like all frozen and stiff. She's like, "I'll never let you go, Jack. I'll never let you go, Jack. I'll never let you go, Jack." And then she lets him go.
And then, Okay. Anyhow, sorry.
My name's Caitlin Wynn, and how drastic do you think the American economy would change if we stopped trading with China?
Well, fortunately, nothing's made in China. Oh, no, wait. Oh, no, wait. Yeah, that would be a big deal since we don't manufacture like we used to.
You wouldn't be listening to this podcast because these mics were made in China.
Everything you see here, with the exception of me, was made in China. Yeah, I think that would be. We have to work it out. I mean, look, China might be taking advantage of us and all that stuff. Tariffs, I don't think, are going to be the way to work that out. But yeah, that's a pretty big trading partner.
They are our largest trading partner.
Yeah,
and then like Canada and Mexico 2 and 3. Is that right?
Yeah,
I want to say that's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, they're a large trading partner for a lot of countries, not just us. I mean, powerhouse.
It would affect the economy in multiple ways. Not only would there be a lack of products, but everything would get more expensive because anything we make right here, American workers are expensive. We demand a whole lot of return for what we're doing for people, and so the lack of products that you would find on the shelves would be problematic, and the economy itself would suffer. But we could go internal and say, well, we're going to make everything here, but you can't afford it. Go ahead.
Yeah. We would have to change our human rights outlook in order to make manufacturing worth it.
Oh, right, yeah.
Pay people pennies. All right, next question.
My name is Yvonne Rodriguez. My question is, what advice would you give to the current resident in the White House about how he would go about dealing with the Mueller investigation?
Yes. What advice would we give Trump? Once again, I'd stop. Anything you say can and will be used to just quit tweeting. I think lawyers are all lining up telling him to stop, and he won't. So he might. I mean,
he should listen to his people when they tell him to be quiet, because the more he says, and those tweets are, and I mean anything like that, those are going to be used as evidence potentially, and he just keeps on keeping on. What interests me is that he stands out there and he says, "Oh, every day it's a witch hunt. It's a witch hunt." If you're a freaking witch, like, you better back up, boy. Like, things are going to come down, maybe. So my advice would be like, just stop talking about it, because it's not helping you, really, in the long run.
I guess the question is, am I giving him advice because I'm trying to help him, or am I giving him advice with something else in mind? Because that leads you to very different places.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, listen, he's not going to stop. This is what got him elected. Yeah. This is what he's always been. He doubled down. He's not, he doesn't listen to anyone, apparently. And, there's some evidence that people are in the White House doing whatever they can to try to curb his really bad intentions and crazy ideas. So,
do you think that part of it is he just gets bored so easily and he just wants to stir stuff up?
Oh, I think so.
Part of it is, and he's always sort of been this way, he likes the show. He likes the chaos and the controversy, and people are talking about him. He really likes that. And so in the big scheme of things, I wonder if all this is just really kind of a game to him. I wonder.
He's a 70-year-old man with tan skin and blonde something. I don't know where it comes from. That's crazy, too. And when the wind caught the back, I thought that's where it came from. And then it flapped up.
It's
more where does it start?
It's more like a massive comb over, maybe? I don't know. I don't know.
Anyhow, so yeah.
Yeah. Maybe wear a hat more so you don't have that embarrassment. I don't know.
Did you see that umbrella? Okay, sorry. Next.
My name is Chase, and my question is, besides Bill Clinton, who is the most influential person to ever live in Hot Springs, from a national or international standpoint?
Oh, I can't think of anybody else. I'm not from here, so I don't know
If you're looking for local impact, I think Oni Madden was extremely influential for a long time.
Oh yeah, he wasn't born here, but he definitely was here for.
He married into
sort of golden years, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, do you know who Oni Madden is? Awesome. Yeah. He's buried over in the local cemetery there. What is it? What's that called over there? Huh? What? Yeah. No. That's a great one. Yeah. Thank you. Oh, winner of the 2018 Dancing with the Stars, Mountain Pine native Bobby Bones.
Was he born in Hot Springs?
Yeah. Well, it's a suburb.
A suburb. Okay.
Yeah. So no, dude is like nationally syndicated, multi-millionaire, and now champion dancer.
Who's the most influential?
I don't know about influence past that though.
What about Arkansas period? Clinton?
I don't know how.
Walton, Douglas MacArthur.
Johnny
Arkansas
Cash.
in
general. Maybe MacArthur.
I was just thinking some Arkansans. Glenn Campbell.
I don't know. Walton would be a good bet.
Sam Walton has to be pretty much the guy,
Yeah.
I would think.
You could probably make the argument he's more influential than Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On a global scale.
Well, for
Absolutely.
about 20 years, Walmart was the #1 retail store in the world.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
and they kind of set the model for what everything else became. So, yeah, that's a good one. All right.
Walmart has, at one time, more employees than some countries had people in their, the population.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so.
All right. We've got 4 or 5 more minutes, so we'll go through the last couple questions pretty quick.
Yeah.
Sophia Guerrero, and if you could be president of any country right now, which country would you choose?
USA. I would be president of the USA just because I'm from here. I like it. And I would be scared to try to run any other country with a different culture. And, a lot of other countries are homogeneous, and I wouldn't fit in. That's the great thing about America is we're all a little different. So, yeah. I mean, I would love to say Norway and high standard, but, yeah, USA.
It's too cold.
Yeah, I'll say USA too.
Yep.
All right, next.
Throughout all of history, what religion or religions do you find most intriguing and why?
I'll take a stab at this. I find Buddhism really interesting just because it's the only major religion I know of that you could effectively be a practitioner without believing in any form of deity.
Oh, yeah.
It's something that works well as a spirituality or as a philosophy, which I find really, really interesting, the duality of it.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I don't know if it's a technicality of religion. It's more of a philosophy. Confucianism always spoke to me because it's about mutual respect and balance and harmony and everyone in the system working for the betterment of everyone else in the system. Respect your leaders, but the leaders treat the people like family. That always made a difference. Hard work and dedication and meritocracy, that's what that instills. Hard work, dedication, education, and rising through not just your own efforts, but as a society. When I think about the different great eras in Chinese history, when they focus on Confucian-style bureaucracy and the way that they promote their lives, that's when they are at their best and probably unstoppable, as long as they adhere to those principles.
I don't know if you've seen Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, but whatever strain of Hinduism that is, that's where we pulled the guy's heart out inside. They started chanting, and he stayed alive for a while. I don't know what religion that is, but I find that intriguing. If you can pull a guy's heart out and he just sits there and looks at you, that's crazy. Okay, sorry. Next.
I'm Ria. Do you think that the Yellow Jacket protests and riots in France are going to have any significant impact on the country?
Okay, so are you familiar with this?
Slightly, because I'm getting more familiar since we're about to take a trip there.
Yeah. Okay. So the French have a history of they protest differently than we do. We have these nice, neat, organized marches and people with signs, and but this is generally speaking, ever since the French Revolution, 1789, we've had the people of France basically take to the streets and to be extremely vocal, and sometimes use barricades and sometimes set things on fire. And it's not necessarily like they're trying to tear the country down. They're just extremely interested in. They wear their hearts on their sleeves, and it's the emotions sort of become open. So this is sort of another version of that, and it's been brewing for a long time. It's the catalyst of it has been a rise in fuel taxes. That was sort of the first step in this, but then it sort of developed into a larger sort of societal anger, not just in Paris, but across different major cities in the country, because of sort of changing. It's not based on demographics or anything like that. It's usually about financial system. Students are protesting because they're changing some of the entrance exam features to get into college and making it more expensive. But I don't. The government's going to have to come to terms with them in some way. They were going to raise taxes. Now they're going to back off that. They were going to raise the fuel tax. They're going to back off that. But there's so much sort of pent-up anger, especially at President Macron, who has promised that he was there for the middle-class people and there for the poor people, and sort of the social sort of French, ideologies. And apparently, a lot of things that he's put in place have actually hurt the lower classes and the middle classes and given a lot of tax breaks, especially to corporations and to the super rich, which is very similar to what we just did here in this country, but we didn't take to the streets in the same way. They are burning things to get people's attention, and it's going to have an impact. Now, how far does it go past this? This weekend is going to be something we really need to watch because there's a lot of momentum for the anger that's being vented. But I think once they blow the steam, it kind of goes back to business as usual. That's been the history of it. But these have been the largest protests since around 1968 or 69. So we'll see where it goes.
You know what France needs? A violent revolution. They never had one of those, and I think it's time to bring.
Well, let's after we get back.
Okay. Yes. Yes. We're going spring break. Yeah.
I don't want to be like Thomas Jefferson sitting in the window going, "You're not gonna believe they just burned down the Bastille again."
They
built
plane.
it and
Is
they
that a
burned it down
guillotine?
again.
What is that? Okay. Last question.
Hi, my name's Ryan Sarden, and I was wondering, I recently read an article that named the American Revolution as the #1 event that defined and changed history. Do you agree or disagree?
Wow, we're pretty new considering.
Yeah, 12,000 years worth of human civilization to some degree, and that one being, I mean, the most recent, maybe, in all of history, I don't know.
I mean, I go religion like Muhammad or something like that changed the course of world history.
Something more rudimentary, like learning to plant crops.
Agricultural revolution.
Yeah, we get to settle down now, and then all the rest of the fun starts. American Revolution is important. However, we're
maybe modern history. That's the most
we're
important
a scratch in historic terms, And do we last? We've only been here 200 and how many years? 230 something, right? So I mean, we're babies in the big scheme of things. So I don't know if we can talk about how we're definitely impactful, and we've come a long way in a short amount of time. But major empires lasting thousands of years have come and gone and done
Just
their thing too.
Just the invention of the printing press. There's no scientific revolution without that thing. So I mean,
yeah.
So I don't know.
If I was even going to go in that era, I would probably go with French Revolution, not American Revolution.
That's interesting.
The birth of true liberalism.
Yeah.
That's because we didn't do that. When we had our revolution, like we were an elitist organization at heart, and we set up a system that then supported elitism in the country. Think about how restrictive we were and still, to a certain degree, have been. French Revolution, on the other hand, said, no, we can all be important, right? And then it got messy.
Yeah.
So...
All right, guys, that is History After Hours podcast. We thank you guys for coming out, and thank you to Mr. Thrasher, Dr. Thrasher, for hanging out with us. And we will see you next time. Goodbye.